to Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies, Healthy Communities, a program of the Missouri Boot Hill Regional Consortium. I'm your host, Valda Ford, and today we have a phenomenal guest, Jenn Haston. She is a person who talks about inclusivity, and she's a dynamic presenter who speaks on all things about how we can love each other more, how we can listen better and understand what's going on. And today, as a person who is a mother, Jenn and I will be discussing the health of women during and after pregnancy. We want to talk a lot about what goes on when you're pregnant, after you're pregnant, and how to know when you need to do more. Welcome, Jenn.
Thank you, Valda. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I have the joy of trying to make sure that infant mortality and maternal mortality are less frequent topics and less frequent occurrences here in the United States. We have some of the worst numbers in the industrialized world, and part of it is what is going on with the health of the mother. Of course, we think about physical health, but so many times we don't think about the psychological effects of pregnancy, the stress on a person, a family, a community when pregnancies don't go well. So let's talk a bit about that. I know that when I was pregnant, I was very fortunate. I think I'm a birthing person. I think that's what I'm supposed to do. I never knew I was pregnant. I never knew I was in labor. I don't remember having any difficult times in any ways, but that's not necessarily the case with everyone. What was your pregnancy/birthing experience like?
Well, to have a conversation about birth is to also have a conversation about infertility. My partner and I experienced a miscarriage many years ago, in fact, 8. And it's an important piece of the puzzle that a lot of people don't talk about because there's this shame and hiding it in the shadows. And through the loss of that child, my partner and I came to realize that there's so much silence about this topic, and most people have experienced it. The first time I got pregnant, I knew that I was pregnant, and I had taken the test, and I was pregnant, and lost the baby at 5 weeks, which is very, very difficult and not something that I share lightly or airily. And it's something that the more we talk about it, the more we normalize it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting the things that we are ashamed of, as if we have any control over these things. I know as a nurse, there are people who don't even know they have miscarried sometimes because they hadn't yet taken the test, may have irregular menstrual cycles and don't even know it. They're just thinking that they had some really heavy flow that month, but later they may find out that it's happened, or it's just tough either way when you, especially if you want to be pregnant, if you've been trying to be pregnant, you find out you're pregnant, woohoo, and now it's like, oh no. I know many people who won't even tell you they're pregnant for quite a few weeks in because they're afraid of that.
And that is exactly what happened when I got pregnant the second time. I didn't want to share with anybody until I hit that 12-week mark, which is known as, you're kind of out of the danger zone. I'm a very cautious person by nature, also a very enthusiastic person. So I wanted to share my news, and I was really scared. I stayed scared for most of that pregnancy because of what happened with the first pregnancy. My child did not move until she hit 25 weeks. Every time we would see her on the ultrasound, she'd be moving, she'd be shaking, but I couldn't feel it. So until we hit 25 weeks, I was still so terrified of that other shoe dropping and losing the baby. And that really informed a lot of what I was feeling. Thankfully, I had a really good therapist that helped walk me through, the different stages, and, that grief is not linear. We could go on and on about the different stages of how mental health impacts your ability to handle a pregnancy, things like that. I had a chiropractor that really helped me keep my body in shape. I would not have been able to survive my pregnancy without a chiropractor because I was in so much pain at first, and they adjusted me safely. So I was very concerned about not being able to carry the baby to term because of the miscarriage that happened before. So it was definitely a piece of the puzzle is, asking people, okay, I had a miscarriage. I don't want to have another one. I know there's a lot of factors I can't control, but what I can control, I really want to control.
Yeah. And that's the thing, isn't it? What can we control? And some of the things we can control are, as you were talking about, you're working with a therapist, you worked with someone who was working with your psyche, and then someone who was working on the physical part. So you had the physical and the psychological with the chiropractor. So when you had the miscarriage, was it a long time before you tried to have a baby again? I know that we speak these days, and I talk to a lot of doulas, midwives, and OBGYNs who say, wait a while, give your body time, especially if you were early in your pregnancy. It might not have felt like your body had been affected very much, but we know when you can give yourself some time, it's better. Do you know how long it was?
I definitely waited a little while to be sure that I wanted to try again. And one of the byproducts of that horrible loss is the surety that came with knowing I definitely wanted a child. Coming from a background of childhood trauma and having neglectful parents, it was not always a lock that I was going to be a parent. And so it was definitely a byproduct of the loss, making me realize how much I really, truly wanted to be a mom.
Right. Well, I came from a relatively large family that got larger when it got blended. So we ended up with a dozen, a dozen children. A lot, right?
Oh,
But
yeah.
I always thought I wanted a big family because even though looking back on it, I know we didn't have a lot. We were blessed to have my great grandmother who was always around making biscuits and beans. I mean, I grew up on biscuits and beans, and now I know how really poor we were considering what my diet was. But we were made to feel like we were special, wanted, and loved. And so I was wanting to have 4, 5, 6 children because I thought that would be the perfect number for me. But unfortunately, I ended up having a hysterectomy in my early 20s, and that dream was lost to me. So tell me, were there people who were supportive of you, or did you tell anyone about your miscarriage, or was it something you just kept to yourself?
Actually, as someone who is a speaker, my partner actually convinced me to talk about it publicly, which is why I'm talking about it on the podcast now. And about a year after it happened, I gave a speech to one of the organizations I was speaking to. And part of my message was the fact that when you have a loss, you have to figure out how to grieve it and how to move on. And the only way through it is to go through it. You can't sugarcoat it. You can't say this didn't happen. You can't pretend it didn't happen. You have to talk about how it happened, how you feel, how unfair it is. You didn't do anything. You're not at fault. This is not your fault.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big piece of my healing, actually talking about it publicly. And the more I talk about it, the more people connect with me and tell me they had a similar situation, or their partner or their sister or somebody in their family has experienced this and they don't quite know how to talk about it. And it's a great opening for them to have me talk to someone or to send them my speech so they can learn a little bit more about what that feels like, or to help their relative understand more about what they went through.
I know one of the things I always hate to hear is someone tell the grieving parents, oh, don't worry, you can have another one. Oh, don't worry. Oh, don't worry.
There's so many platitudes. And I think my least favorite one, and there are many I do not like, it's God's plan. It's like, I can't really get behind that right now because it's not at all comforting. And as a woman of faith, it is very upsetting to hear that, because then it questions, well, how's your faith? And then you're kind of stuck on, well, did I not believe enough? And that's just a horrible circular place to take you. So if anybody's heard that out there listening to this, it was not your fault. And don't say that to somebody. I'm going to take the opportunity to say, don't say it's God's plan to someone about a miscarriage.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that our bodies are amazing at doing what we need them to do. And my education as a nurse and as a person who worked around the OBGYN area, the postpartum labor and delivery areas, I know that our bodies sometimes recognize that the pregnancy would not be a good one. And that is why the body does what it does. But, that's, our body makes some decisions that they don't send the message to us. Okay, here's why I did this. I just want you to know. But the beauty is that you worked through it. So if there are people out there now, and there obviously are, who have had a miscarriage, whether today, in the last month or so, or years ago, are there things you would tell them to help them get through it when you know there are a lot of insensitive people, maybe unintentionally, but a lot of insensitive people out there saying things that you really just want to take them and throw them off the building?
Yes, there are a lot of well-intentioned, insensitive people saying ridiculous things. So what I would say is feel how you feel your feelings, and grieve. One of the things that helped us was naming the child. And we decided that it was a boy, and my partner commemorated the date in a tattoo on his arm. That was something he wanted to do. And it's definitely something where it's a different journey for everyone. I think grief in general looks different on different people. Some people, you'd never know they were grieving because they're hard charging in the world, doing their things. They still have quiet moments of grief. By the way, I'm talking about myself. You can still have quiet moments of grief and still get plenty of things done. And then there's the other side of the spectrum, which is you can't get out of bed in the morning because you're so depressed. And neither one is more valid than the other. And they all require help. This is where I go back to mental health. Make sure you seek out a mental health professional, one that you really trust and you connect with. It's not enough to go to a therapist. You really need to find one that meshes with you and, that you feel comfortable talking to. Because if you don't feel comfortable, it's not going to do the amount of good it would do if you are comfortable with them, sharing with them and getting tools from them about how to cope with a loss, whatever it is.
Yeah, I want to go back or continue with that whole vein about the therapist, because many people think that anytime you go to anyone who is licensed, certified, or otherwise recognized as a healthcare professional, that person is the only person you have. And some people who are in places of limited resources, who may not have a lot of options, may feel stuck. But I can tell you that the first time I went to a therapist, it was after my son died. And I was pretty much ready to throw myself in front of a train or whatever vehicle would just take me away. I had blamed myself. And I remember the doctor just said to me, "Oh, well, it's normal for you to feel like this." And that was good, except his next step was just to say, "Here, take these pills and you'll be better." Not come back, let's have a conversation, and I think he was a psychiatrist. And so they're typically best for prescribing meds and setting up a plan, but may not necessarily be the best ones for having a conversation. And I was just in my 20s. So I went out to get another therapist, and that therapist said, medication is not for everyone. And I really hate it when people automatically put you on medications without first trying something else or combine it with talk therapy or some other form. So after that, I was able to sit and talk about it because I was that person who didn't cry. There were people who just said, "What's wrong with you? Are you made out of stone? Why aren't you crying? Why can't you get up?" And about 6 months later, I hit a wall where I really couldn't even get out of bed. But that's when I went to the therapist. But I'm telling you, people were so ugly to me because I didn't act the way they wanted me to act.
Oh my gosh, Valda. First of all, I'm so sorry for your loss. That is a horrible loss that you experienced of your son. I'm grateful that you went and got help. And your point is so well taken that just because someone has letters after their name, just because they're licensed, doesn't mean they're the answer. Also, the thing that you said about how are you not more, you don't know what the person is going through. You don't know what they're doing. There's not one way to handle anything, by the way. This is not just about grief. This is not just about how you handle a loss. It's how people handle their life. Like right now, we've got so much conflict in the world because people are up in arms about other people handling their business and doing what they need to do. And the amount of people who have an opinion about that saying, you're wrong, you're doing this wrong, is unbelievable.
On the CDC website, and it's talking about how depression can cause such severe symptoms that can affect daily life. And for new parents, new people who are taking care of small people, if you don't even recognize how deep your depression is, then sometimes that means that that child is not going to get the type of care that he or she would need. But most importantly, that just as we were saying, depression or anxiety or any type of psychological imbalance at the moment or permanently doesn't feel the same, doesn't look the same, may not manifest the same for everyone. And
No.
have you found that when you're talking to people that they'll say, I know I was depressed, but as you were saying earlier, they just got up, they kept going because what choice did they have?
Yes, I would say that is absolutely true. And depression acts like a spectrum, right? A friend of mine did a one woman show, and one of the things she talked about is not being able to get up and put her shoes on. And that's what she wanted to do. And then there are other people who, as we talked about before, they're impacted, but you don't know it as much because they choose to share with a select group of people. Maybe I don't want to tell you my whole story. That's the thing I was going to say. If you share with people, not everybody deserves your story. So if you want to share with people, that's fantastic. I think it's also important to know who you're sharing with and setting them up to say, it's a big thing in my life is asking people, do you want support or do you want advice? Where are you right now? Because that answer can change. I've had someone say, I'd like support. And a little bit later, I think I want your advice. But right now, I just need support. And it's so vital to know your own brain to know that. And in those early stages, you may not know what you need, but reaching out is super crucial because the first thing we do when we're depressed is isolate. We isolate, we isolate, we isolate.
Yeah. Some depression symptoms that if you see someone in your life who seems to be struggling, you may see that they are sad for a long time. I mean, it's okay to be sad when bad things happen to you, but when it persists and there's just no light coming in, that can be a symptom. They feel hopeless or pessimistic. They feel guilt. They feel worthless. I mean, people want to blame you because you had a miscarriage, or you blame yourself for something that you have no control over. You may have problems concentrating, recalling details, and making decisions. You may have a loss of energy, difficulty falling asleep, or difficulty getting up. You may overeat or lose your appetite. You may have suicidal thoughts, and you may have aches and pains that don't seem to be for a reason. And these are just some symptoms. So when you know that you're not feeling right, trust yourself. That's the most important thing. Trust yourself, and then find someone who can support you in getting the help. It may not be a licensed clinical therapist. You may have someone in your life who is just an exceptional listener who can help you know where you are and how deep you are in that hole.
And I think one of the things about that, Valda, you and I talked about previously, is that look to your community too, because there might be somebody in your church, there might be somebody in your community organization or group that you see on a regular basis who sees you and says, "Hey, Jenn, you seem like there's something wrong." And it was one of those things that until I went to therapy, I didn't realize how different depression looks on different people. Because I even told my therapist, I didn't even know I was depressed until I went down the line of things that I was depressed about. And she said, yeah, it doesn't always look the same way. And I think that's one of the things I wish more people knew,
Mhm.
is that just because you're not crying and sad and tissues everywhere and blah, does not mean you're not depressed.
Yep. And that's why we always hear people being surprised that someone committed suicide. I mean, they had everything.
And talking through all these different pieces of mental health, I'd be remiss as a parent if I didn't bring up the fact that there are times when I need to see my therapist more than I need to go parent my kid. And I may not be able to go to my therapist right now, but I can make an appointment right now. And I can make an appointment to see my therapist within the next week or so and make sure that I'm filled up and I have my oxygen mask on before I'm trying to parent my kid. And sometimes that looks like you need to go see your therapist. Sometimes that looks like you need to outsource your parenting and you and your partner need to take a break. I also like the idea of babysitting rings where people had pods. And so they would say, okay, I'm going to babysit for you. You're going to babysit for me. We're going to trade. So there was no money changing hands. You just spent the money on the date. And the date could have been pizza with your partner. That's it. No kid. And I feel like the outsourcing of parenting is something that, I don't know, as a parent, we feel guilty about, right? Which is ridiculous. We're all doing the best that we can. And when you have these moments where you need help, it is really okay to talk about it. And I think in the last couple of years, it has gotten to be so much more prevalent where people are saying, you know what? I am taking a mental health day. I am going to not be a part of this particular meeting. I'm going to turn my camera off and just be here, but not on for this particular meeting.
Mhm. Yeah, and especially with this pandemic, post-pandemic thing that we have going on, we had to do pods for so many reasons. And I don't know how many people thought about parenting pods because, what is so amazing about that is regardless of your resources, then you can get someone to help you. Because when people tell me what it costs now for childcare, my eyes bug out and I'm just like, whoo, how can you afford $200 a week per child or more to get any type of quality childcare when you're working? I mean, just think about the kind of money you have to make if you have two kids and you have to pay up $400 a week for childcare. But then if you have low resources, or even if you're just trying to develop better relationships, that isolation you talked about, you can help get past that isolation by making the first overture. Oh my goodness, you have a baby, my baby's the same age, maybe they can have play dates. Oh, and while they're having a play date, if you want to go and have a back rub or sit in the park and look at the birds or go shopping in peace where you're not saying, no, put that back on the shelf, you can't have that. It is definitely something that can help you, just giving ourselves respite. We somehow have guilted ourselves out of that. Because remember, the saying that's been around forever, it takes a village, and
Yes.
we can create our own village.
Yes. And that village can be friends, family. It can be family of choice, which is a phrase I really love. The people that you choose to be in your life, and they can help and you can help them, right? Like the whole idea is that it's reciprocal and it's community. I think that's the thing everybody's been missing in this period of isolation as we, get to post-pandemic, hopefully soon, is this idea of community. Let's be kind to other people because it costs nothing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that we lost so much of our civility over the last 3 or 4 years, where even though we've gotten more and more into, oh, look at me, look at me, look at me, it's more like, look at me doing ugly things. Look at me being celebrated for being ugly. I saw something the other day where there were people fighting in a courtroom, and Number one, why would you want to physically fight in a courtroom? I can just see all sorts of negative repercussions from that. But there was someone filming it, and someone who ran up and said, please, please, please use your phone to call 911. I don't know why the bailiffs, the sheriffs, whoever else would normally be in there, but they were really becoming physically violent. And the person was like, no, I got to put this up on YouTube. No, I got to put this on TikTok. It's like, come on.
Mhm. That's
What has happened? And so we have forgotten. And if you're a person who's new to a community, or perhaps you lost so much during the pandemic, you lost people, you lost jobs, you lost your home, you might be totally bewildered. And now you have a child to care for as well. Do that reaching out. And for instance, I spoke to a group a few weeks ago, and it was one of my first in-person talks where it didn't feel like I should be afraid of being in the room, right? Without asking, without them having.
right, right.
And let's just say I killed it. And there were all sorts of people who were like, oh, this is great, blah, blah, blah. Let's talk. So I exchanged names. I exchanged numbers. I followed up. And one woman said, oh, what can I do to help you when we got together for lunch? And I said, I don't want anything. I just came to have lunch. And she was shocked about that, because she was thinking, if I reached out to her, I must want some. I was like, no, I am making a conscious effort to get to know people, to talk to people, to get past this isolation and insulation that I created during the pandemic. And she was like, I mean, she was flabbergasted. She didn't even know that people did those things. It was like, yes, this is how we should be as human beings all the time.
You said it in a word, Valda. It's kindness and not expecting anything in return.
Mhm.
Kindness, right? It can move the world to be nicer, to be kinder. And I wish we had more of that. I wish more people were doing what you're doing, which is reaching out and saying, hey, I saw we have this in common. Let's meet up and talk.
Yeah.
Who knows?
And, sometimes it's not going to work out. It might be a one-off, because she still was flabbergasted when I left. 20 minutes after trying to say, yeah, I'm just here. I just wanted to meet you, because the few minutes we talked, I thought, wow, you're an amazing person. You're doing amazing things. She was trying to do things to lift up the community. But I also look around for those people who are kind of looking like, no one talks to me because I don't have stuff going on. I'm like, yeah, of course you do. You've got a beautiful smile. I see that you take care of your parents. I see that you're helping little kids learn after school. And they're thinking they have to be this big person who's doing huge things instead of kind things and helping people rise up. Wow.
Only true.
I tell you, well, I love the fact that you talk about outsourcing parenting, man. I was fortunate enough to have a younger sister who loved to get a few dollars from me here and there. And she loved my son to death, so she was always glad to do it. And then my mother, who had declared she was not babysitting anybody's children, she was like, oh, I could keep them tonight, just tonight. And then that was every night. But
Aw.
these are things that, when you do not have nannies or a gazillion dollars to just pay for whatever you need, then finding a community of people who will be there for you is so much more important anyway, to me, because you know that they are there for you, not because of recompense. Even though if you got a couple dollars when it's not in a pod, you shouldn't abuse people.
Well, very true. Very true. It's all about a community environment, right? And I can do this for you, you can do this for me. Also have to be careful about how you position that, right? Because you don't want to take on that assumption that this is how this is going to go forever. It might just be for a month or 2 months. And I think that it's really important to talk through that too, and making sure the boundaries are clear and there's buffers. And it's like, hey, if I ask you to do this, you're allowed to say no.
Yes, no, that single word answer does not need any more explanation. Nope, sorry, can't help you. Don't feel guilty about that either, because I have seen a lot of young mothers in overload because they feel like they have to do everything for themselves, everything for the children, everything for the family. And oh, by the way, take on the needs of some wayward sibling who's not taking care of their children and taking them in. One of my friends talks specifically about grand families, those people who take on the responsibilities of children when their parents either cannot or should not be the parents.
Yeah. Something you talked about just really resonated with me. This idea of, you know, if you can't do it, you need to admit that. If
Mhm.
you need help, it's important to say, I need help. I can't do this on my own. And the thing that you're talking about with the emotional labor, the mental load that women carry on the things that they have to do, the doctor's appointments that we keep track of. Is she registered for school? What do we need to do for daycare for the summer? Are we doing camp? Like what? Blah, blah, blah. Just this running list that just goes on and on and on. And women in general take the brunt of that. And
Mhm.
it's hard because you need to ask and say, you know what, I need some help with this because I cannot do this all on my own and I cannot let this all live in my head.
Mhm. Yeah, it's true. And sometimes when they're doing everything, like the type E personality, doing everything for everyone, every time they ask, then that's when it's even easier to drop into depression. And then I just want to differentiate, since I brought it up, postpartum depression. That can be like we talked about depression. You're overwhelmed. You don't know what to do. You're feeling sad. You don't want to get up. You don't want to do the things you're supposed to. But if you have a new baby and you're feeling like I absolutely have to, I'm not getting any sleep. I'm not resting at all. I'm trying to catch a nap when the baby naps, but I'm afraid that, ooh, maybe I won't hear the baby cry. So I got a baby monitor beside me. But
Mm-hmm.
postpartum depression can be marked by just crying all the time, being angry or withdrawing from people you love, feeling distant from your baby. And that is a huge thing. If you don't feel good about your baby, I'm not talking about typical bonding, but you're just like, who is this creature, alien, imposter, invader? Talk to somebody, talk to somebody. If you're thinking about hurting yourself with a baby, talk to somebody. If you're doubting your ability to take care of the baby, talk to somebody, because postpartum depression has gotten worse. And I imagine when we look at the numbers, everything got worse during the pandemic, including maternal mortality. And I would imagine that postpartum depression got even worse with all the things that we're dealing with. So outsource outsource your parenting when you're feeling really badly, when you're thinking especially about hurting yourself or the baby. Do not think you can get over that by yourself. Find some help, and preferably some licensed clinical help. Reach out. There are usually those people who are there for you regardless of your financial situation. So do not think that, oh, I can't afford to get help. You can't afford to not get help.
And advocate for yourself. That's a big piece too. Like, you know, something is off, even if it's a little bit off. Advocate for yourself. You know what? I don't feel like myself. There's something going on. Talk to someone. Talk to someone.
Well, and I can tell you that as a nurse, even with all the knowledge that I have, I've had times where I've had to fight to get the care that I need when I know. I mean, I've been to 4 different programs with degrees post high school, and I still am sitting there saying, I think I really need some help. And they're like, well, why don't we check on it in a week or two? Like my blood pressure was skyrocketing and I couldn't get the doctor to pay attention. And I'd never had high blood pressure before. And they just kept saying, well, why did you stop taking your blood pressure medicines? Like, yeah, I'm Black. You assume that
Mhm.
I have hypertension automatically. I was just about 40 years old. And I really had to work to get them to listen. I had to basically threaten. And sure enough, I was put in the hospital and I nearly died. But that doctor was going to send me home because he says, well, your blood pressure is high, but since you're a nurse, you can just check your own blood pressure and you can get back in here when it's time. And I was like, I know the standards. I know what people are saying. You should do this if. Here's the algorithm. Your blood pressure is at 200 over 110. That means you need to get in the hospital, not check it at home because you're a nurse. So I always worry what is going on with people who don't have the knowledge that I have, who don't have the words, the jargon, the whole lexicon that they have, those clinical people, and they're being sent home. A good friend of mine just told me that her mother went to the hospital complaining of a headache, long-term fatigue, and they just said basically everybody's stressed out, go home. And she died of a massive heart attack that night. And then they could look back to see she had already had a heart attack. But this is why that self-advocacy that you talk about, when you know something is wrong, don't let people send you away. If you're not a good advocate for yourself, find someone who will do it. Find an organization that will do it. But don't go sit in a corner when you know, oh, I feel bad. This is why these women are dying postpartum, because they're saying, oh, I feel like I'm bleeding a lot. Well, of course you would bleed. Or I'm feeling like I have pain. Of course you would have pain. No, listen. And because healthcare providers are down 20%, approximately 20% of providers quit during the pandemic. You know, everybody's stretched out and you have to speak louder to get heard.
And you have to tell them to slow down and say, wait a second. I know something's wrong. You're not going to give me the bum's rush to go to your next patient. You're going to talk to me. I waited. I'm here. There is something wrong with my body.
Mm-hmm.
And I know my body. There's something wrong. And you have to not be afraid to say that. I know that's scary, but I recommend speaking to a friend, somebody who's been through it, because they will be able to help you find the right words before you go see your doctor and say, look, there's something off. And, you know, whatever data you can bring in, like, this is usually my blood pressure. This is what it is right now. There is something wrong.
Yep. And I'm telling you, I have just experienced a few things of late in the last 2 years. I'm like, really? Is this what you're giving out as care? And I'm not trying to besmirch the entire healthcare profession, but I can tell you, they were already short-staffed to begin with. They're shorter staffed. There are more people who have just decided in the whole world not to work now. You know, I'll just do something else. I'll just do without. You can't even get people to work at fast food restaurants anymore, even though they've gone up to $20 an hour. No one wants to work. So
For
I
sure.
don't
Yeah.
know. Jenn, is there anything else you want to bring up before we close up?
I think the biggest thing is making sure that people know the acronym of HALT. If you know that something's wrong, the first thing you want to do is check in with yourself. Are you hungry? Are you angry? Are you lonely? Are you tired? Any one of those things will cause you to act in an active impairment. And if you have any more of those, it can be worse. So always make sure that you're checking in with yourself and HALT.
Come to a halt. So if you're hungry, angry, what else?
Lonely or tired.
Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And I would imagine if any of those things are elevating, so if you're always hungry, that can even be a sign of diabetes. If you're always angry, then it means you need to get something going on. If you're feeling lonely, is it because you have become alone? Because alone and loneliness are two different things. Or are you absolutely feeling the lack of human interaction? And then are you tired? Because depression can keep you from getting out of the bed. So can other things that are autoimmune. Some of the first signs of cancer, heart disease, lung disease, kidney disease is fatigue. So I love that acronym because any of those things out of balance should tell you to go get some help.
Absolutely, Valda.
Well, Jenn, this is amazing. I love the fact that you spend your life talking to people, trying to get them to have better conversations, getting them to think about the beauty of inclusivity and also kindness and civility. And I appreciate everything that you're doing. And I especially appreciate that you're telling us as mothers and parents to what? Outsource your parenting.
Yes, that is what you need to do.
I love that. I'm going to use that and pass it along from now on.
Good.
So Jenn, Thank you so much. Will you tell people how to reach you if they want to know more, if they want you to come and talk to their groups, to their organizations?
Absolutely. The best way to get a hold of me is at Haston Helping Hands, which is on Instagram. And that's Haston, my last name, Haston, helping other people, hands, like your hands.
Okay. And we will make sure that we put that at the end of this podcast so that they can get to it, or look in the notes and you'll find the link to Jenn. As always, thank you so much for being here. And thank all of you out there for listening. I know this has been beneficial to me and it can be beneficial to you. Please share this information with your friends. And remember to follow up with MBRC. If you need some help, we have case managers, we have transportation to appointments, we have a community of people, a community action network who can be that set of people for you when you do feel alone. See you next time when we're here for Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies, Healthy Communities. Bye-bye.